everyone, welcome back to my channel. This video is going to be kind of for tourists who intend to visit Toronto, but also Torontonians who are looking for really cool bookstores and don't know where to go. So I thought I'd make up a list of bookstores that I've personally gone to many times and I've enjoyed or loved for many reasons, but I'll list the reasons under each one. And then underneath in the description box, I will link an article that I've written in 2018 about bookstores, some of which have closed since. And all of the bookstores I talk about in this video will be listed in terms of which neighborhood it's in, so that you're in that area, you know that there are a few other bookstores to look for. I'm not going to put these in any particular order, like my favorite to least favorite, but I am going to first mention some bookstores that are themed. So the first 5 bookstores are sort of themed. The first one is called Mabels Fables, and this is Midtown Toronto. And Mabel's is one of the oldest children's bookstores, and it's been here for many years. I think 36 years at least. It's named after a cat named Mabel. We're currently on the 3rd Mabel, but she's there and she's always sleeping in the window. Very cute, very nice greeter when you walk in. The store is divided in such a way that you have a section for babies and toddlers at the bottom where you have picture books or pop-up books, and that's usually where Mabel is. There is a tiny section on books for adults in a nook, but as you head upstairs you find kind of general books for kids ages 8 to 14, and then a young adult section. So the YA section is pretty big upstairs. The great thing about Mabel's is that it has a lot of author visits from children's authors, and you have signatures on the walls from people like Neil Gaiman, Kenneth Apple. I'm learning about some new artists as I'm recording this too, so that's been pretty fun. And they also have some singing classes for toddlers and babies, so it's kind of really a hub for the community when it comes to children. It's worthy of a visit because of the way it looks and the way it feels. It's just so great, so highly recommend this bookstore. And if you go just further up the street in the same place, you will find Inhabit Books, which is a very new bookstore in Toronto. And I've mentioned it before on my channel because it sells only books written by Inuit writers and artists from Nunavut. And I'll link my video on that literature up above. But if you want to see something different and a bookstore about places you've never been to, or myths and legends about different people and different places, it's such a great and cozy spot. It is very small, so if you walk in you'll see mostly books about or for little children and some toys, and there's a tiny section on books for adults. They also have on Saturdays reading time for children, so this is again for really teeny tiny children, but they do it every Saturday. It's really great. And it's got an amazing cast of staff. They're really great there, and yeah, it's worth a visit, especially if you find yourself in the Midtown area and you're already going to see Mabel's. You might as well pop by Inhabit Books because it's super cute and very unique. I don't think you'll find such a niche and specific bookstore. The 3rd bookstore, which is very specific, is called the Bakka Phoenix Bookstore, and this is in the Annex University of Toronto area on Harvard, and this focuses entirely on science fiction and fantasy and speculative fiction, and they always have the newest publications. Like, you will see books on there like the day they come out. You can pre-order books from them, and they also have author talks from time to time with science fiction and fantasy authors, and these are usually hosted in their basement, which has a huge area of used books as well. So if you go down there when there isn't a talk, you can also look at their used books. And again, the staff there, amazing people. Some of them are writers as well. So yeah, you can be introduced to a lot of new books that way. I really love that place. The 4th thematic bookstore is called the Sleuth of Baker Street. This isn't as easily reachable by subway, because it is a bit of a walk from the closest subway stop, but you can get to it if you take a bus or if you just decide to take a bit of a walk. But it is sort of in the Midtownish area, And this is a mystery bookstore, mysteries and thrillers, and it's thematically named after, you know, Sherlock Holmes. The only thing I'll say about this is that even though it has really cool books in it, it does have really strange hours. So it's kind of difficult to get there when it's open all the time. So I would look up online their hours before you decide to go to make sure that it will be open. The fifth themed bookstore is Acadia Art Books. So this is a bookstore on Queen Street in the Jarvis area-ish. And this bookstore has some classics and some rare books, but it mainly has old prints and books that are about art and artists. But it does have a lot of wonderfully illustrated books, even if they are like children's fairy tales or something. But it will be more of a focus on the illustration portion. And they have so many things there. You can spend an entire day in this bookstore. They also have an upstairs, which is equally fascinating. People, I guess, don't often go up the stairs. And they have two cats, Frodo and Pippin. Now, I will say Pippin kind of looks like a Sam to me, but maybe he's a lot of trouble. I don't know. But yeah, they've both been featured in Bookstore Cat's account, both Pippin and Frodo and Mabel from before. So if you follow Bookstore Cats on Instagram or Facebook, you would have probably seen them already. But I really like that store because of its sort of artsy focus, and it does have a lot of rare books, which is really cool. And I find it that unlike other places, it is affordable in terms of pricing for rare books. If you find yourself in the Village, there's also the first and oldest queer bookstore, and this is Glad Day Bookshop. And with Glad Day, it's kind of a hybrid of a bar / cafe and bookstore. So it will have some vintage items of classics LGBT authors, and then it'll have new releases as well. But during the day, you could sit there and have a coffee or a tea, and then in the evening, they sometimes have poetry nights or readings, and they'll have alcoholic beverages. It's such a lively place, and it's so cute and quaint. It's really, really nice. So it's worth a visit for sure. Now, this is one of my favorite bookstores, and I'll explain why in a second. But this is on the Danforth, and it's called Scribe. The reason I love Scribe is because, again, it has really rare books, but they have reasonable prices, I would say. So for the entry, you have a lot of books that are well illustrated, good quality books. They even have medieval manuscript fragments. They have all kinds of things that are reasonably priced. And then in the back room, there are really rare books. Like, we're talking signed by Dr. King kind of books, rare editions of like Lord of the Rings or even Peter Pan. So you have things that are just really, really rare, and those can range. So in that hub, you might find books if you're looking for acquisitions for your rare book library or something where you have a much bigger budget. But in the front, you will still find rare books that are affordable and reasonable for what they are, and they're always in great condition. And I really love their presence online as well. They have a good communication with people, and I don't know, the staff there, really great. I personally really love this store. And if you find yourself in that area, you might want to go a bit further east and go into Rereading. This is a used bookstore, secondhand books, but I'll tell you that for me, I am taken aback by how organized this bookstore is. This secondhand bookshop is more organized than libraries I've worked in. Like, it's incredible how well put together this store is for being a secondhand bookstore. And recently, it's kind of had a glow up. And at the back, they have so much science fiction and fantasy and vintage things, but they have this really cool appearance, and there's props and really cool designs on the floor. Like, I find it fascinating to be in there. It's so much fun. Really love it. And if you go just a tiny bit further down the street, you will come across another secondhand bookstore called Circus. There they have books, a lot of them, but they do have a very large collection of vinyl records as well, and they're reasonably priced. Like, I would say this is kind of a cheaper, more affordable secondhand bookshop than the others, especially like compared to places like Scribe. But it is worth visiting if you find yourself in that area, to do the cluster of Scribe, Rereading, and Circus. And you'll find Book City there as well. So you could do like 4 bookstores in that area. Now, if you find yourself further south near Trinity Bellwoods Park, you will also come across Type Books. Type is kind of like the Toronto independent bookstore. I think it's been there for such a long time, and it's kind of like your go-to if you're looking to buy local. They always have a lot of literary works. Like, I think a lot of the booktube books that I saw in its early days that were new releases, literary fiction, but also kind of Toronto local, and it's got this very, I want to call it like the literary vibe to it. When you walk in, you feel like you're in a dark academia sort of club, and you're hanging out with people who are kind of really into the arts, and you're talking about books, and they're all new releases. Then they also have kind of, not pamphlets necessarily, but new publications in terms of magazines or literary things like that. So Type is your place if you're looking for that kind of a vibe. Going back a bit north on Bloor in the Annex, you have the Monkey's Paw and Zoinks. Now, the Monkey's Paw is interesting because it's the first and only bookstore really to have a bibliomat. So this is a place where you kind of take a gamble and put some coins in this machine, and you get a book, and you don't know what it's gonna be, but it's usually really cool, and it's kind of rare-ish. It's just fun because it's kind of like a surprise for yourself. Obviously, if you don't like what you got, it kind of sucks, or if you have it already. But they're usually kind of unusual books that are not easily found that you get into that bibliomat. It's just kind of like a fun surprise. And I think this bookstore is the only Toronto bookstore that's been featured in Jen Campbell's Bookshop book. Yeah, there's that. And then Zoinks is around that area as well, and it's a secondhand bookstore, and it also has a lot of vinyls and records. If you're near the Eaton Center and you're on Queen Street and you want to walk a little bit towards Jarvis, but not quite at Acadia Books, you will also find McNally Books. This is the newest bookstore to me. I went there recently, and their staff is really friendly, so nice, and they all seem to be really new books, and it has a kind of, I don't know, like a new bookstore vibe with like a lot of nice wooden shelves. Like, it's got a very classy air to it. It feels very like Professor Higgins-ish. I don't even know how to call it, but it's got a really nice atmosphere. It is very tiny. There's not a lot of places to sit around, but it's really nice, and it's got nice staff. And they have some books that I didn't expect to find. Like, recently when I went, they had a theme that was kind of bookish books, or books about books. And that's something that's really cool. And they had some facsimiles of really hard to find books. And if you find yourself on College walking past the U of T Kensington-ish area, you will also find Balfour Books. And now you're kind of entering Little Italy a little bit. But Balfour Books, the first time I went in there, I was taken aback by their use of Scrabble pieces to label their shelves. They have a lot of art books, a lot of poetry books, a lot of classics. Like, here you'll find a lot of classics. It is a secondhand used bookshop, but their books are in great condition. They're not like cheap finds. And it's reasonably priced, but it's a really fun place to be. And then if you go even further, I found this store called Sellers and Newel. What I liked, so it is a secondhand bookstore, and it has a lot of the classics, but it also has a rather large wall filled with books on the occult and vampire books and weird fiction books. So this is kind of like a really niche used bookstore, but it's nice that it's secondhand, and it has some stuff in that category of books that are out of print. So that's why that bookstore is really great, but it is a bit further out. So especially if you're visiting Toronto for the first time and you're staying in the downtown core, this might be a bit of a trek, but it is worth making. I love the place. If you are in the Kensington area and you're entering Kensington, before you do, just stop on by at She Said Boom, because it's a very tiny bookstore, but it's got a lot of used books and used records, and that's where I found some of my favorite books by accident. They sort of have a lot of classics or books that you don't regularly find, but they're still written by people you know. Like, that's where I came across so many random side classics. Like, I don't even know how to explain it, but it's almost like they know what good books are, and they know that they're not as popular, so there's something sort of hipster about it. And they also have a lot of music there, so you'll find a lot of cool things in that bookstore. And another one that I'll mention, which is in the Annex, and this is if you pass BMV Books, which is pretty massive and it takes up a lot of real estate, and many people are drawn to BMV because it's got like 4 floors of just books of all genres. They kind of get stuck in there, but if you walk just a little bit further, in a basement, you will find Seekers Books. And Seekers is great because they're open until midnight. So if you have an emergency where you really need to get a book, like really late, but you also want it to be a used book and you want to find an unusual kind of cast of people, that's your place to be. And it's just got a nice vibe to it, and it's down these stairs. It's really cool. And they also have a cat, and I forgot his name, but I think he's named after a politician. If I remember or find it, I'll put it on the screen. And the last place I'll mention is called Alexandras Antique Prints, Maps and Books. And this is close to Mabels Fables and the Inhabit Bookstore, but it has a lot of rare prints and a lot of rare books, but it's kind of like highbrow aesthetic and less affordable. But sometimes I even find that some of their rare books aren't even as rare or as valuable as the ones you would find somewhere like Scribe or Acadia Art Books. So this is kind of like pricier things, but also more niche and rare in a different way. And it's got a lot of prints, but it does also have a lot of Canadian prints and Canadian history. So it might be interesting for a very particular kind of collector or a particular kind of library acquisitions department. So that's kind of what you would go there for, but it is worth visiting if you are in the area of those other bookstores. So that's it. These are the bookstores that I've personally had the pleasure of visiting frequently, and I'm also going to link down below the article that I've written in 2018 featuring books and bookstores that were around back then. Some of them, if they don't have closed down in brackets, are still around, so I've mentioned a few more in that, and it involves a lot more student-based things around the University of Toronto area. So I hope this is useful. I hope you go and enjoy these bookstores and visit them and keep them thriving. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in a future video. Bye!